I'm still on hold. I'm just trying to book a studio in Holland for my new album. Guess I'll have to do that later. 2 episodes ago, we talked about 1995's 20 Good Vibrations, the Greatest Hits Volume 1. Last episode, 1999's 20 More Good Vibrations. And now we come to the third part of the series, the third trilogy of hits in the Beach Boys catalog. We come to Best of the Brother Years, or perhaps we should say the full title, Greatest Hits Volume 3, The Beach Boys, Best of the Brother Years, 1970 to 1986. That's a bit of a mouthful. Now, to be very honest with you, Volume 1 had been a reasonable hit, cracking the top 100, successful enough to be reissued in 1999. Volume 2 was a very minor hit. It made the top 200. I think the back half of this album was probably a bit of a tougher sell, so the casual fans who purchased Volume 1 maybe didn't shell out for Volume 2, hard to say. Volume 3 did not chart. This is easily the least successful of the series. It was released February the 1st, 2000 to cassette and CD. I looked for the cassette. I've been looking for one for a long time, but they don't pop up on eBay very much. They're just not really all that popular. I think by 2000, CDs had pretty much eclipsed the market, and the cassette nowadays, if you were to find it, would be a very interesting rarity or curio. So, you might remember my 2-part episode on 10 Years of Harmony. 10 Years of Harmony is pretty unique in the Beach Boys catalog because it's devoted entirely to work between 1970 and 1980. So, no 1960s hits on there. This is unusual, and I think that might stem to some of the reason why this one was not a success, because this covers, just as it says in that enormous title, 1970 to 1986. So we're talking about a less commercially fecund time for the group. Remember, the Beach Boys only had 3 top 40 singles throughout the 1970s. The biggest one, of course, going all the way to number 5, their cover of Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music, a song that's still associated with them today. The other 2 singles, It's Okay and Good Timin'. Everything else fell beneath that. There were a few that almost cracked the top 40, but those were by far the big successes. So let's go over the track list real quick. So going chronologically, again, this is really the final time we'll see a chronological hits package, or even near chronological hits package. We have Add Some Music to Your Day, Susie Cincinnati, This Whole World, Long Promised Road, Disney Girls, Till I Die, Surf's Up, Marcella, Ceylon Sailor, The Traitor, California Saga, On My Way to Sunny California, Rock and Roll Music, It's Okay, Honkin' Down the Highway, Peggy Sue, Good Timin', Goin' On, Come Go With Me, Get You Back, and California Dreamin'. So 20 more songs there for you. Some of those you might be immediately familiar with, especially today, because we've seen 2 box sets that have celebrated 1970 through about 1974. So it's really nice to see those songs before they kind of had their big resurgence in popularity. Alright, the interesting thing about this set also is that some of the tracks use the original single mixes. Now other sets use the single mixes as well because they're instantly more iconic, like the single version of Help Me Rhonda, far more popular than the album cut. So there are 4 songs on here. They are marked with an asterisk on the back there. Susie Cincinnati uses the original single, California Saga, Rock and Roll Music, and It's Okay all use the original singles. It's Okay, the only real difference between the album and single version is the single is sped up, so it's slightly shorter. Not a huge difference, and really only noticeable, I think, if you listen to them kind of side by side. Rock and Roll Music, like that single I showed you earlier, the 45 here uses extra synthesizers, kind of like a scratchy backing sound to it. Very interesting stuff. Susie Cincinnati was only released as a single in 1970. It would not be on an album until 1976's 15 Big Ones. I don't think there's really a huge difference between the single and album. I listened to them before I made this video and I didn't notice anything jumping out at me, but if you know more about the mixing details, I know of course it's been reissued. The single's been reissued other times, like on Feel Flows. But if you know more about the recording of this track and the different mixes and whatnot, please comment below, because I couldn't find a whole lot of difference to really talk about. And the one difference, or I should say different single mix that I really like, that I'm so glad is here, the single version of California Saga, using the official single subtitle On My Way to Sunny California. Very seldom do we see this released. And up until Sail on Sailor, really the only way to get it was either the vinyl 10 Years of Harmony, the original 45, or this release. But a lot of other Beach Boys releases keep the subtitle for the single, even though they use the album mix. Really the big difference, it's all in the mixing, and Brian Wilson gets extra vocals on the single. I like the single version a lot better. Anything that gives you a little more Brian is okay in my book. So real quick, I'll show you the liner notes. Unlike the other ones where we get kind of like the accordion style pull-out pamphlet thing, here we get an actual booklet by Brad Elliott. It goes song by song. I'll just show you a few pages from it here. Song by song, gives context to the various albums and whatnot at the time. It's very well written, very detailed. Brad Elliott is a Beach Boys expert. He's done a lot of writing about the group, and we get a little section at the end, just like in the other ones, with what album the song is on, with chart placement, or chart peak, I should say, and whatnot. Interesting stuff there. And some contact info and production credits and things like that. So it's a nice booklet, very detailed, and it is honest in the sense that it acknowledges that a lot of these songs weren't runaway charting singles and whatnot, that some of the albums that the group released during that time, like the MIU album and even Sunflower, were not really commercial successes. They've grown in prestige, or at least in recognition over time, but they weren't popular with audiences of the 1970s. So if you look at our track list here, Add Some Music to Your Day, the kind of lead single for Sunflower and the Beach Boys switching from Capitol over to their brother label, was a minor charting hit. Susie Cincinnati didn't chart and was a rarity for several years till it was on 15 Big Ones. This Whole World was a B-side. It's grown in popularity a lot. It was done live occasionally, even into the 80s, so I see why it's here. Long Promised Road was fairly successful. Disney Girls was not released as a single, but that's like Bruce Johnston's most recognized Beach Boys song in the live set, even in the 70s and 80s, so it makes sense it's here. Till I Die and Surf's Up weren't particularly successful, and maybe a little too dreary or a little too avant-garde to be commercially successful, but they were integral parts of the Surf's Up album. So it's good that they're here, I think, as kind of a recognition of that album, of that work. And they fit in very well here. We get Marcella from Carl and the Passions. Then we have Sail on Sailor, which was a top 50 single when it was reissued in the mid-70s and is one of their most iconic 1970s songs now. We have The Traitor, another classic from Holland. California Saga and Rock and Roll Music. We have the single mixes of both of those, as with It's Okay. Then we have Honkin' Down the Highway. Now I want to talk about this because I'm going to correct a mistake I frequently see on the internet. Honkin' Down the Highway was issued as a single, actually we'll start with this, for the Beach Boys' Love You album. Love You did not produce any major successful singles. The album was moderately successful, but none of the individual songs were. 10 Years of Harmony here uses Roller Skating Child, which was in their live set for a few years. But this set goes with Honkin' Down the Highway, one of the main singles. Honkin' Down the Highway, the single version, this record here, omits a part. Online I see the erroneous claim that it removes the drum intro. That's not true. It removes a small instrumental piece of music about 2/3 of the way through the song. Around the "taking one little inch at a time now" part, there's an instrumental bit cut out. This release uses the full album version, so it has that instrumental piece. After that we have actually not greatly successful, but reasonably, successful single for the group. Their cover of Peggy Sue. If you knew of Peggy Sue. Peggy Sue made the top 60 for the group. It was almost on 15 Big Ones, I believe. I know there are alternate mixes that float around YouTube, but it was held for the MIU album, and to capitalize on the big Buddy Holly craze of the late 70s, actually did fairly well, and is probably one of the best remembered tracks from that album. Good Timin', their last top 40 of the 70s. Going On, which kicks off the 80s, from Keeping the Summer Alive, peaked at number 83. Come Go With Me. Although Come Go With Me was recorded in the 70s, it was not released as a single until 1981 to promote 10 Years of Harmony. You can watch my two-parter on 10 Years of Harmony to get more context on all that. But Come Go With Me was very successful for the group, and even today is a cover that's heavily associated with them. Here it is included with the 80s tracks instead of the 70s ones, I think to reflect the sequential release of the singles. I could see some fans maybe getting angry about that, but I think it's okay where it's at. And then we finish off with their 1985 hit Getcha Back, which I would say next to Kokomo is probably their most iconic 1980s song. Mike Love redid it in 2017. And weirdly enough, even though it was a Capitol single, we have their cover of California Dreamin', which has come back into vogue thanks to like Stranger Things and stuff like that. So, really cool cover. Lady Liberty, the B-side, did not make it. But interesting stuff. So a lot of unusual tracks, a lot of very different tracks. I love their 1970s output where they were trying to figure out what they were going to be for this new decade. Very, very interesting stuff. The cover image, Appeal to the Great Spirit there. The Beach Boys have used that as a logo. Here's my cap there that reflects that. A lot of Native American artwork used in the 70s and 80s. End of the Trail as the album cover for Surf's Up and so on. If you've been watching this series for a while, you might remember that our first few episodes, there were different versions of these albums released in the US versus the UK, like the original Best of the Beach Boys trilogy. Here is the European copy of this album. Notice anything different? Look carefully at that track list for a moment and tell me if you do. In case you didn't see it, they removed one song, Disney Girls. Maybe they thought Disney Girls was a little too heavy on the Americana for a European release. I don't know. I think it was released as a single in Europe but not in the US, or at least parts of Europe. I don't know. But instead of using Disney Girls, they used Bruce Johnston's Tears in the Morning. Also from Sunflower. Tears in the Morning was a big hit in Europe, and it pops up on several European best-of compilations. And I think maybe if you asked a fan from Belgium or the Netherlands or even England, they'd probably pick that over Disney Girls when it comes to Bruce Johnston's contribution. Sounds good here. It's nice to see it for a change. It also has the disco, Here Comes the Night. Beach Boys fans know one of the most infamous things in the entire catalog is their 12-minute long disco song, Here Comes the Night, an earlier song changed into a disco boogie. This has the 4-minute version, I believe. Pretty sure the 4-minute single version. It's an interesting listen. I don't know why they didn't just use the 4-minute one on the album. In my video, 1 Foot of Fun, 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 we talk more about Here Comes the Night and the 12-inch singles and things like that. So check that out if you want my dissertation on that. And it also has Suma Hama, which was a charting single, at least in the UK, maybe elsewhere in Europe too. Suma Hama is a little bit, I guess, passé in the sense that Mike Love sings in Japanese and so on. He does not like to talk about the song. I've asked him about it before, and the look he gave me could kill a flower. So it's just like, you know, maybe it's something he wants to forget. But it is here. I have to say, all the mixes on both of these, the US and UK versions, sound really good. They were newly mastered. Yep, all tracks are 24-bit digital remastering, and all selections are stereo, according to the package there. So, sound very good. Really nice set there. So, even though it wasn't a success, I really like these. So this was my third Beach Boys purchase. These were my first two. This was my third. If you want to start getting into their 70s and 80s output and kind of digging deeper than the hits, great place to start. a worthy follow-up to 10 Years of Harmony, too, which is kind of, kind of unique in that it focuses on the less commercially viable period for the group. Now, there are a few omissions when I read down that track list that might surprise you. Notably, Forever does not appear. Forever had a big boom in popularity in the 90s thanks to Full House. Not used here, though. Forever was a B-side and it was in a live set, but didn't do much in the 70s, really. But apparently they didn't think it was bankable enough to put here. We don't see Cool Cool Water or Don't Go Near the Water, which is a shame. Both of those were singles in their time. We don't see All This Is That from Carl and the Passions, which is a big fan favorite. We don't see Feel Flows, which was, at this point, probably kind of neglected, but it would gain traction in the next decade. And we don't see Lady Linda on either release. This is really surprising because Lady Linda was actually a really successful song in England, and I believe they still do it live there. So interesting choices for omissions. But all told, a fascinating set, just not commercial enough to be a hit. But our next episode will look at one of the all-time greats, one that you will know as soon as you see the cover, 2003's Sounds of Summer. I look forward to seeing you there. With summertime on the horizon, what better thing to talk about? I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.